It's 2023 and you want to get started in photography, but you don't know where. You don't know what camera should I buy, what kind of lenses should I buy. There's a lot of decisions to be made. I've been using the Sony a6000 for a couple of years now, and in this video hopefully I can put this camera on your radar as a good first starter camera to get you started. So if you are a beginner and you are getting into taking pictures and you really don't know what you're doing yet, one thing that I think makes the Sony a6000 a perfect choice for you is how easy it is to use. There's no complicated buttons, there's no advanced settings to trip you up, and that makes it a lot easier, because if you have a camera that has too many settings and too many advanced options, it's just going to make learning the basics even harder. So super easy to use, doesn't get confusing, and I think it's perfect to get you started and start taking some pretty good pictures. I've come out today going for a bit of a hike, and I figured I'd take you guys along with me to try and get some pictures to kind of show you guys how this camera works. And it's a little dull, kind of a cloudy day, but we got a cool tree down. Another thing that I definitely think helps is the startup cost. I remember when I was trying to find a camera, the budget was a big deal for me. I didn't want to spend too much money and end up with a camera that wasn't going to do me good. The Sony a6000 is definitely a camera to look at because the startup cost is pretty cheap. You can find the body and a kit lens for a couple $100, which is not bad at all. I've seen people be able to pick them up for $250, $350, and for a whole setup, that is not bad at all for the quality that you're going to be able to get with the camera. Hello there. Hello. How are we doing? Editing Tony back. I just got that trim. Sheesh! Anyways. Alright, so this part of the video, I've got my 6000. I've uploaded a couple of those photos that I took yesterday, which you saw just a second ago. I have them loaded up here in Lightroom, and what I want to do in this part is just to show you, just go over some of the photos, do some simple, basic, nothing crazy edits, and kind of just show you the pictures that I was able to take on the a6000. And if you want to pull up some pictures and follow along with just some of the basic edit stuff that I'm doing, please feel free to. But the main goal of this is just to kind of show you the quality of the photos that you're going to be able to get with this camera. So I'm going to go ahead and get working here. So I've already been playing around with a couple of them. But to start out, we'll play with this one first. Got a picture of, this was a tree that had fallen over the, my hood mic set up here. I don't have a stand for my microphone, so we are improvising. I'm going to be editing from scratch, no presets, and I'm just going to be doing a basic, nothing crazy. These photos are not going up on Instagram, so I don't need to be doing anything crazy with these pictures. This is just for you to see the quality of the photos. So I'm just going to come up here to basic. We're going to bring this exposure up just to see what we're working with. And firstly, I'm going to bring down the highlights. I'm going to bring up the shadows. And then we're going to do the opposite here. I'm going to bring up the whites, and then I'm going to bring down the blacks a little bit. So as you can see, if we zoom in here and we go to before and then after, we're able to get a little bit more detail out of these shadows, and it also brings a little bit more color into the image. So we're going to come back up here and we're going to bring our exposure down a little bit now that we know what we're working with. So let's go to our white balance here. So playing around with it, I'm going to warm it up just a little bit because we have all of these warm colors like these greens, and we have this brownish orange in the leaves. So we're going to leave it, that should be good right here, and we're going to cool it off a little bit by moving it towards the purple, something like that, before, after. See, look how much more detail we have in the trees up here when it brings back, dials down the highlights a little bit in the sky. Alright, so now that we've got that done, we're going to come down here to our tone curve. Now, I normally do this with just about all my pictures, is I do a little S-curve in the tone curve here. So I'm going to bring up the highlights, I'm going to bring down the shadows, and I'm going to introduce a little fade just by bringing this dot up a little bit. Nothing crazy, just subtle little changes. Now, we're going to come to our color here. Now, one of the colors that sticks out to me here is this orange brownish we got going on in the foreground with the leaves. So all I'm going to do here is I'm going to increase the saturation a little bit, and then I'm going to bring down the luminance, something like that. It's easy. It doesn't have to be complicated. This is just simple basic edit. Cool. So now let's hit the greens. So we're going to look at these greens over here. I'm going to bring the saturation up a little bit, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to bring the luminance down just a bit. See what the hue does. Alright, I like that more cyan bluish tone to it, so I'm going to leave it like that. Alright, so that's pretty easy. Now, one thing I will do is that in pictures where the foreground comes up like this and I'm low and it kind of fades out into the photo, how I have the foreground right here, one thing that I do sometimes is to drag the viewer's eye to the main part of the photo, which is this tree that has fallen over. One thing that I like to do is I will come over here to our gradients. I'll grab a linear gradient, and I'm just going to drag it onto this lower part of the image here, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to our saturation, and I'm just going to bring that saturation down just a little bit so we can kind of see taking that saturation a little bit out of the bottom. And all that's going to do is it's going to help bring the viewer's eye from the bottom of the image, kind of funnel you up into what I want you to be looking at, which is the fallen tree on the trail and the mountain in the back. So another way we can help lead our viewer's eye is by either doing a linear gradient, or what you can also do is you can come down here to effects, and we're just going to add a vignette here. That's just going to darken the edges, and then we are going to adjust our midpoint here, bring that roundness in, feather it, and then we're going to bring those highlights in. And what that's going to do is that's going to affect the highlights in the vignetting. So you see this top right and this top left where we have the sky. We don't necessarily want to darken the sky, so we can lighten those back up by bringing up the highlights. See, when I have them all the way down, it kind of darkens a little bit, and that doesn't look very realistic because we have the sky bright over here and then darker over here. That doesn't look right, so we're going to bring those highlights back up a little bit, and you see it's going to brighten those areas back up. So we have this outside edge darkened, which is going to help bring our attention here. Now, last thing I'll do for this photo is that sometimes, especially in nature photos, I will smoothen it out a little bit because we have all these hard edges with the trees and kind of edgy and sharp, and a lot of sharp edges. So one thing that I like to do is I'll bring the texture up a little bit, and then I'm going to bring the clarity down, and what you see is it's going to kind of smoothen it out a little bit. So that's before, that's after. I'll exaggerate it so you can get a better idea of what it looks like. That's a more exaggerated version. It kind of smoothens it out a little bit, but we want it to be subtle, so we'll bring the texture up a little bit and the clarity down just a little bit. Now we want to make these colors pop a little bit more, so we can do that by just pushing the bright vibrance up a little bit, and we're going to get those those browns slash oranges to come up and that green to come up a little more. And that looks pretty good. Just a simple, easy edit. So we'll do one more here. Let's see. And I think we're going to do this photo. I took this photo because I kind of liked how dark and gloomy and chill it looked. So first what I want to do is I want to bring the exposure up a little bit, and then we're going to do the same thing. I'm just going to bring the highlights down, shadows are going to come up, whites are going to come up, and the blacks are going to go down, just to bring out a little bit more of that detail in the shadows. And then it's a little bright, so I'm going to bring that exposure down just a bit again. Contrast, boom. Alright, so right off the bat, we've got a little bit more detail, we got a little bit more color, and we're going to come do our S-curve, so we're going to put our 3 dots here. 3, oh, that's good. We're going to bring our highlights up, and then we're going to introduce a little bit of fade, something like that. So, I mean, already looking pretty decent. We're going to come to our color here. Let's see, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to come over here to our oranges. We're going to bring the saturation up a little bit. See, you can see the leaves, how it makes the color pop a little bit more. We're going to bring the luminance down. Push that over a little bit, and then with the yellows here, let's see what... Okay, so we got a little bit to work with, so I'm going to bring that saturation up a little bit, and then I'm going to bring that luminance down just a bit. Okay. Reds. I'm going to bring the saturation of the reds down just a little bit because I don't want that red to mess with our oranges. So I think we'll be good there. And then lastly, I'm just going to mess with our greens here. So I'm going to bring the saturation up a little bit, and it has a strong bluish, cyanish tint to it. So I'm going to bring the luminance down. I'm going to bring that saturation down just a little bit, a little strong. And then I'm going to come more to the yellow side. Cool. Boom. Just simple, nothing crazy. Now for our filters. So before I add any linear or any vignetting, one thing I do want to do is your eye is led down this trail. So to capitalize, I guess, this, one thing I like to do is adding a brush tool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, do I already have it? Brush. Alright, so we're going to grab our brush tool. We're going to make this a little bit bigger, and all I'm going to do is I'm just going to brush down our trail here. Oy, I didn't mean to move that. Just something like that. And all I'm going to do is come down here to exposure. I'm going to bring that exposure up just a little bit, just to make that trail pop a little bit more, because that's kind of how we want our viewer to look, is to kind of go down the trail. So then what we're going to do is create another brush, and we're going to do the exact opposite. So I'm going to grab my brush tool and paint around here. We'll come over here. And all we're going to do is come to our exposure, and we're going to bring it down just a little bit. When we make these adjustments, we want them to be as subtle as possible. And then our light source is coming from the top of the image, so we're going to grab another brush, and all I'm going to do is come up here. Oh, that's before and after. I'm going to make that brush tool a little bit bigger, and I'm going to paint over our highlights here and just kind of introduce, bring that exposure up just a bit. That may be too much. We're going to do that. We're going to bring the highlights up a little bit, like that. Boom. So now we have our light coming from up here, we have our trail, and just like that last photo, we are going to come down to our basics here, and we're going to smoothen it out just a little bit. Clarity, we'll go a little bit more, and then we'll up the vibrance a little bit. Boom. I think we got a pretty cool picture here. Oh, and these are the settings I used. ISO 640, f3.5, 1/400th of a second. So that is it for today's video. The Sony a6000, it's a great camera, and I don't think you'll be disappointed if you were to come across one of these. I hope you enjoyed this video. I make other related videos here on YouTube. I use the Sony a6000 as my full photography camera. So if you haven't already, subscribe. Check out a couple of my other videos if you haven't, and I will see you guys in the next one.